Got a question on TikTok asking if a lease expires and then becomes a month-to-month tenancy, does the Tenants Protection Act apply? If so, do you need just cause? Hi, my name is Rob Wells. I'm the Landlord Warrior on TikTok and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to our videos. Now, the answer to this question is going to be very factually driven. For example, under the Tenants Protection Act, one of the prerequisites for the protections of the Tenants Protection Act to apply, a tenant has to reside in a property for 12 months or greater. So if your lease, for example, was a 6-month lease and then became month to month, and at that time, let's say on the 8th month, you wanted to terminate the tenancy, the Tenants Protection Act wouldn't apply because the tenant has resided at the property less than 12 months. However, if it's your typical 1-year lease type of tenancy, further questions are going to need to be asked, at least from the Tenants Protection Act purposes of, is the tenancy exempt under the Tenants Protection Act? And that would depend based on the circumstances of the tenancy. For example, if this lease agreement was for a single family home or single dwelling home, basically, and you had your Tenant Protection Act exemption under Civil Code Section 1946.2 subdivision E8, you would be exempt from the Tenants Protection Act. However, if your tenancy didn't have that disclosure, at that point in time, you wouldn't opt it out of the Tenants Protection Act. You would be subject to the provisions after the tenants lived there for 12 months. So it's going to depend. Also, some landlords might they might have multiple dwellings. They may not have an exemption, or it may not be new construction with a certificate of occupancy issued within the last 15 years. Those are exempt as a matter of law. Basically, it's written into the law itself. So your situation in mileage is going to vary based on the circumstances. So when you're in doubt, if you have questions about whether your property is exempt under the Tenants Protection Act, have the rights under the Tenants Protection Act accrued, it might be best to talk with landlord's counsel to find out what applies in your situation. More importantly, you might be in a local municipality that actually has more strict requirements as to just cause termination of tenancy that are protections greater than what state law provides. And at that point, in case if your ordinance is stronger than the state law, or your ordinance was in effect before the Tenants Protection Act was passed, those rules might apply. So the answer to this question will vary based on facts of where the tenancy is at and what type of tenancy it is. So if you're in the Northern California area and you need help figuring out if Tenants Protection Act applies, what type of tenancy you do have, and how you can terminate that tenancy, please feel free to reach out. We might be able to help out. Put your comments, questions down below. Until next time, folks, I'll talk to you then. Thanks.